Good afternoon and welcome. This is Anjaniki Jones, the Director of Learning of Maryland Nonprofits. Welcome to the webinar. It's a time for a financial management upgrade. Everything you need to know about choosing the right technology. Just to let you know that Maryland Nonprofits, our mission is to strengthen organizations and networks for greater quality of life and equity. And we are committed to helping you navigate the many changes that are needed during this time. We encourage you to visit our website for the latest information about COVID-19. We have resources there specifically for nonprofits. This is a member-only event, but if you have colleagues at nonprofits who are not already members, we hope that you will encourage them to join, to sign up for our newsletter, and to check out our upcoming events. There are two events that I'd like to point out in particular. Next Monday is a town hall with the Department of Health. And at the end of the month, we are holding a roundtable event for nonprofit CFOs. So I know some of you may want to join those events and the many others that we have coming up. And you can see all of those on our website. I also want to emphasize the importance of public policy advocacy, especially right now. The millions of dollars that have been brought into the nonprofit sector through the CARES Act, the Paycheck Protection Program, and other programs is a direct result of the advocacy that Maryland Nonprofits and our sister organization has done. And we were included in the CARES Act legislation, and we want you to thank your legislators and continue to insist that they look out for the nonprofit sector as well. Today's presenters are Javier and Ariel Goldin of the Goldin Group CPAs. They are joined by two of our members, Amy Greensfelder of Pro Bono Counseling Project and Margaret Melanie of the Writers Center. And we are just so proud that the Goldin Group is our CFO at Maryland Nonprofits, and thanks to their assistance, we've had a lot of success in this area. You'll get a chance to hear directly today from two nonprofits who have enhanced their systems so that you get an idea of what it really takes to move to the cloud and the benefits of using cloud-based systems. The presenters will be taking questions at various points throughout the program, and you can submit your questions using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our first presenter, the Goldin Group.
Thank you, Janiki. Thank you. Ariel, would you like to take over? Ariel, you there?
Yes.
All right. Okay, please go ahead.
So it's our pleasure, and it's great serving Maryland nonprofits and their members, and you know, we look forward to sharing the information with you and hope that we can help you as well. Next slide, please. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about what is a financial tech stack and what values can it bring to an organization. We're also going to talk about some considerations to keep in mind when implementing a financial tech stack. And lastly, we want to share with you some tips and resources that we've learned through the dozens and dozens of tech stack implementations that can hopefully help you when you decide to make a transition to a financial tech stack. Next slide, please. So what is a financial tech stack? So at its core, a financial tech stack is a grouping of technologies that work together in order to capture, process, and display your financial information. But before we get into that, I did want to highlight how can technology change an organization. So the first way that technology can change an organization is it can change the way that your organization captures information. And that's significant because you, as an executive director or as a CEO, it can change the way that you make decisions based on the information that you have today for the future of your organization. Technology can also change the way that your employees carry out their job functions. Automation these days has really allowed for the elimination of a lot of manual inputs. So some of your employees who work with a lot of data, it can free up their time to focus on other aspects of the organization. Another point that I really wanted to highlight about a sophisticated financial tech stack is that it can change the way that donors view your organization. In a donor's eyes, if they can see that your organization has taken the time and the effort to implement a sophisticated financial infrastructure, that portrays your organization in a far more positive light in the donor's eyes, because it can really show the donor that your organization is equipped to handle donations and track the funds and make sure that they're being tracked and used for the purpose for which they were intended. Next slide, please. So here, we wanted to highlight a couple more benefits of a financial tech stack. But one benefit that I really wanted to emphasize that's very relevant for all of us today is how can this tech stack help us during the pandemic? So the first way is a method that a lot of you have probably had experience with, which is Zoom. If your organization had Zoom and had its proper communication softwares in place, such as Slack or Microsoft Lync or any IM type software, if it had these processes in place before the pandemic, that would have made the switch from a office environment to a working from home environment far more seamless than if your organization did not have these softwares in place before the pandemic. Another one is the PPP loan application. If you had any experience applying for this PPP loan with the CARES Act, if you have a modern cloud-based financial system that can be accessed from anywhere, and you as the executive director or CEO and your employees or your outsourced accounting firm, if they can all access that at the same time, that would have made the gathering of the information for the loan far easier than if you only had a remote or a desktop software that could only be accessed by one person or was in a physical location. So it would have made the gathering of the PPP loan information far easier. And to apply for the PPP loan, time was really of the essence. So whenever you're in a time crunch to get a bunch of financial data together, to review it and to submit it, this is where cloud-based technology can really help you immensely. The last point that I wanted to emphasize here as it relates to the pandemic is scalability. Unfortunately, some organizations have had to lay off or furlough some employees, but these financial technologies can really allow you to decrease the amount of users that are using the technology, and in turn, they can decrease the cost of using the software for your organization. Now, on the other side of that coin, as your organization grows, these softwares can very easily grow with your organization and increase the amount of users so that you can get the most out of the software as your organization grows. Next slide, please. So transitions to a financial tech stack are certainly not easy, and they do require a lot of planning and thinking. So here are some transition considerations that we implore you to keep in mind when thinking about transitioning to a financial tech stack, and Javier is going to elaborate on some of these points.
Thank you. So yes, let me go over some of the more important considerations when transitioning. First and foremost is the idea of culture. Unfortunately, I can tell you of many instances where conceptually everyone liked the idea of moving to cloud-based technology or putting new pieces of software in, but if upper management, read the executive director and the board, has not fully bought into the idea, then there is bound to be a lot of resistance when change is implemented at the organizational level. So for a successful transition to happen, first and foremost, there's got to be from the very top all the way down clear guidelines of what will happen. And when I say clear guidelines, I mean things such as the decision that the organization will move in a particular direction, and those who have difficulty moving will either be moved to a separate position or they will be let go. That's the extent of the culture change that needs to happen. course, it doesn't have to be abrupt, but it does have to be conclusive for this to succeed. Next one, please. Need. Okay. So technology is forever being re-energized, recreated, revamped, and new products are being introduced. What you want to ask yourself is, what do I need exactly? Is it the internal workflow that is dragging me down? Or is it that I'm not capturing exactly what I'm delivering, and therefore I cannot tell my stakeholders the success of my mission? So think about the biggest pain points, because this is a process. Actually, it's a never-ending process, because once you start moving with technology, and as we all know, things are continually moving in this direction of growth, of newness, of development. So you will continually be changing the organization and moving it towards this direction. So need is a matter of thinking ahead of time of what priorities you will put before you when the transition occurs. Next one, please. Budget considerations. You can spend pretty much any size budget that you want in creating a tech stack. There's a lot of sophisticated and a lot of very expensive software and hardware. And so an analysis needs to get made as to how much money you have not only now in your budget, but also you will have throughout the years to maintain the system. What I will say is that what we have seen over and over is that if the organization does not include in its current budget a line item for technology improvements, then it's very difficult for the money to merely appear. But what we can also tell you is that donors, generally speaking, are very open to giving money when a submission is made for an improvement in technology. It's a relatively easy sell to tell someone, we're going to improve our tech stack, we're going to have a far more robust base, and we're going to be more equipped to capture information and give you information. So please consider raising money for this specific purpose, as we have seen that it's a relatively easy sell. Next one, please. What do I need? So as we said, there is software to virtually do just about everything. And what software you will use depends on the current needs that you have, on the budgets and the priorities. We would advise that you begin with an accounting system, which is the central repository of all the information. We would also look at a payable system so that checks do not have to be written by hand anymore. They can be all approved online, cloud-based, remotely. A donor database, most certainly a payroll, third party, which most people already have. Timekeeping system if you have grants. Employee expense if you have credit cards. And an employee communication tool, as Ariel mentioned, which now has certainly come to light to be of extreme importance. Next one, please. Next item we want you to keep in mind is that buying the software and setting it up, if it's easy enough to set up, is just the beginning of this process. We would highly recommend that not only that you get someone, that you assign someone, a team, whether it's internal or external, for the setup itself, which depending upon the complexity of your organization can be time consuming and can be quite intricate, but also the ongoing maintenance that you will need for the software. One of the advantages of buying cloud-based software is that our partners, the software vendors, are constantly improving. So in our firm, certainly, we have people dedicated to constantly reviewing the updates that have been made and to see how those fit the needs of the clients that we have. So the software, again, is not just buying it, it's not just putting it in place, it's also maintaining it and looking at the improvements that are constantly being made and see how those apply to the work that you're currently doing. Next one, please. IT support, which goes hand in hand with maintenance, is this idea that, again, this is a journey that begins with the decision to move the organization, but it never ends in terms of finding out the new features, finding out what new software exists, finding out how to improve efficiencies with the organization, and certainly maintaining and troubleshooting what you currently have. Next one, please. So if you were to ask yourself, how do I start? This is a lot of stuff. You know, I want to move there. What do I do first? So the first thing I think is that you need to decide whether the transition will be carried out by an internal team or an external team. The second point is, you know, depending upon the budget, how big do I want to go? We have had instances where we have gone into very large organizations and the ED had decided to change all the system at once. Now, this was quite disruptive, but at the same time, it was quite necessary and we could get it done. Or you can say, I'm going to have 6 months to a year or more of a transition period where I or an external team will be implementing the software step by step. So the period of time and the pace at which it will be implemented will be just as important as choosing to move into the cloud and the various factors that you'll think about, that you'll take into consideration when choosing the right tech stack and financial infrastructure that you need. So this is a short presentation. It's just to keep some things in mind. If you go to the next slide, please. We're welcome to take some questions here. And just to let you know that we as a firm, that's what we specialize in. We've been privileged to have been working with the Center for Nonprofit for now 7 years and many of its members. This is what we do best, as hopefully you will hear from some people with whom we have already worked. And we're here to help. So by all means. If there are no further questions, then I'm going to turn this over to Amy G.
Great, that's correct. This is Amy Coates-Madsen, just to let you know we don't have any questions right at this moment, but we'll hold for questions later on.
Great. Amy, can you confirm that you can hear me okay?
You're all set. Thanks, Amy.
Okay, great, thank you. Amy, just chime in. We were having some problems with my audio earlier, so now I'm slightly nervous, so just chime in if there's any issues with audio and we'll see if we can get it corrected. My name's Amy Greensfelder. I'm the Executive Director at the Pro Bono Counseling Project, and I'm also a social worker. Next slide, please. I learned from Heather Iliff that one should never waste an opportunity to share the organization's mission. So the Pro Bono Counseling Project provides free counseling to anyone in Maryland who has limited resources, who needs connection to a counselor. We have a network of over 800 licensed mental health providers who volunteer their time, and folks who are interested in connecting for mental health care can just contact our office at 410-825-1001 to get connected to a volunteer licensed mental health provider. And all of that has moved to teletherapy and telephone counseling since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. I also, in listening to Javier, I thought that one thing that you all would probably be interested to know is the size of our organization. We have 6 staff currently and a budget of about $500,000 a year. So just to give some context for the rest of this. Next slide, please. And just as we get started, I did want to share that I'm going to mention a few products that we have found have worked well for us. we're not receiving any kind of benefit for mentioning any particular product or vendor, and I really encourage you to research any product thoroughly prior to selecting to make sure it works for you and your organization and your context. So please don't just go on my word of anything. I'll look into what's going to work well for you. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm a social worker. I also have an undergraduate degree in English. So I am not a financial advice expert, nor am I a legal advisor. So any of this is just meant as just information purposes only. Next slide, please. I did want to share where we were and where we are now. So we started with unskilled staff doing our bookkeeping, and then we ended up hiring a bookkeeper as a part-time W-2 employee, and then we moved to outsourced financial services and cloud-based finances. So that's the transition we went through, and so I'm just going to share a little bit about where we were and how we got there. And so where we were was when I started with the organization about 3 years ago, we were using outdated, inefficient software. There was concentration of duties where we were able to spread things out to the extent we could, but not as well as would be recommended for organizations that have the capacity to spread duties out more. And the staff who were doing the finances were inexpert, as I said at the beginning. I'm an English major / social worker. So there you have a picture of me doing the bookkeeping. That's a live picture of what it really looked like. Next slide. Thank you. Whoever is laughing, I'm trying my best at humor, but I listened to Wait, Don't Tell Me on NPR, and they've had to like pipe in a laugh track because you're not really, you're never sure without the cue of people actually laughing if your jokes are landing at all. So it just wasn't working for us. The software, and Javier can explain more for you what this actually means, didn't allow for double entry bookkeeping, which is what you really want for organization finances. We were actually using, I'm letting you way behind the curtain today, but we were using Quicken, which is home finance software. It's not meant for organizational use. So when we did our audit every year, we had to do a bunch of journal entries to create that double entry system. And the software also, and this is way behind the curtain, it required using a computer that was over 10 years old. The CD had been lost over the years. The software was no longer supported. So I had to use as my main work machine a computer that looked not unlike the one in the picture there. And for staffing, it was really a drain on people's skill set, expertise, and time. I was probably spending about 10 hours a week on bookkeeping. And as I mentioned before, the separation of duties just wasn't realized in the way that would be recommended. Next slide, please. If I could have the next slide, there you go, thank you. So then what happened? We got a new board member with strong nonprofit finance background who advocated for new software and bookkeeping support. While that's not an actual picture of the board member, he really has been a superhero on the board and really advocated for us upgrading our financial systems. Next slide, there you go. And so what we did next was hire a part-time staff bookkeeper. And what we found with that, to use some change management languages, there were some pluses. Where we had now a dedicated person in-house with expertise. We hired the person on as a W-2 employee, so they were a staff member. We were able to get that separation of duties, really realized now that we had 3 staff members involved with the finances, with one doing the check processing, another doing the bookkeeping, and another doing oversight. And because we hired that person on as a W-2 employee, we were able to get some increased capacity and multitasking. So they were able to help us with some duties outside of finance as needed. So that for us worked really well, that we were able to get some bookkeeping support as well as some other administrative support out of an individual. However, we realized there were still some areas that we could do some improvement on, some areas where change would be needed. So I continue to be supervising this person, and the person doing the supervision, that is me, remained unknowledgeable about accounting. I do think in general, it's possible to supervise staff whose expertise is outside of your area of knowledge. However, in this particular situation, it just wasn't working out, that I wasn't able to get the reporting and things in the way that the board wanted. I would ask the staff member for some things, the board would give feedback, and there was a lot of just back and forth where I didn't know enough to look for the kinds of things that some of the board members were looking for from financial reporting and such. So my lack of knowledge really was a hindrance there in being able to supervise the person effectively. The systems at that time, back to that other slide, back there, thanks you. The systems remain tethered to paper and specific computer. So I heard that in Javier's presentation and Ariel, that when you're doing local-based computing and things are tied to specific computers, it can be an issue. It definitely was an issue for us, and that we at this point transitioned to QuickBooks. So we upgraded from Quicken. I no longer was tied to that ancient machine, great, but the QuickBooks we had a one-user license, so it was only available on one computer. So if that staff member who was only with us 6 to 8 hours a week wasn't there, then I didn't have access to, without going through all kinds of IT hacking to the system. So if there were an emergency, of course, I'd be able to get into any computer, but on a regular basis, I wasn't just logging into some other computer in the office to get reports and such like that. And there was no backup. If that staff member became unavailable because of vacation or sickness or anything like that, no one else was available to be doing the financial, the bookkeeping, the bill paying, and all of that stuff. So we decided a change was in order. So next slide. So what happened next? Long story short, our organization ended up moving to a new location. So when we are actually in our offices, not in our home-based environment, we are now at HASA, which is another Maryland nonprofits member. And through our relationship with, so HASA is renting office space to us now. And so that's a picture of me and Erin Stouter, who's the CEO of HASA. And she mentioned to me that she uses the Goldin group for financial services, and she suggested I check them out. So through Erin, I got connected to Javier, and the rest is history. Next slide. So where we are now, because of this relationship with the Goldin group, we now have contracted finance consultants and cloud-based systems. Like Javier and Ariel mentioned, we're using QuickBooks Online for the bookkeeping, we're using Gusto for payroll, and we're using Bill.com for bill payment, and all of those are cloud-based. Next slide. Some of the benefits we've experienced are trusted experts. So I have a pair of CPAs at my disposal now that I can just go to with any kind of financial question, and they're extremely knowledgeable and well trusted. Strong reporting. Not only can the consultants through Goldin Group get me whatever reports in whatever format I want, I also, because we're using the QuickBooks Online, I can even cut out the middleman. I can just go right on QuickBooks and pull reports as needed and check on, was this bill paid, was that bill paid, what's the status of that, what's the P&L for last month. Just at a fingertip, I can get into all of that. There's built-in backup. So as I mentioned, I have a pair of CPAs that I work with. A team of 2 are assigned directly to my account. So if there's an issue with either one of them, the other one's available. And if God forbid there was an instance where they both became unavailable, there's the backup of the whole team at Goldin Group. So I no more the concern of a staff member going on an extended leave and bills going unpaid or what have you. And I think for me, the biggest benefit, one of the big benefits, is just no more paper. I'm not dealing with this paper and that paper and signing this check and making sure the backup's here. All of it's already, it's all cloud-based, it's all scanned in. I'm not dealing with any kind of financial paper anymore. And with that Bill.com, I approve all the invoices electronically. I log into a system and just check off all the approvals, and that Bill.com automatically generates the checks then. And vendors can even get ACH payment through Bill.com, which the vendors really appreciate. And the bill pay is just so much faster than would be able to do by hand. And all of this allowed for a really easy transition to the remote environment that we find ourselves in. And really, and I'll get into this when I talk about some of the cost benefits, staff time was freed up for fundraising, grant writing, relationship building. So sometimes these things can be a bit of a hard sell because of the costs associated with them. However, your time is now being used to be generating your mission, to be generating, to having impact through your mission, realizing your mission, and then bringing more money into the organization. I wouldn't be, back when I was, hunched over the ledger, this was 10 hours of my week that I was spending on this stuff. And even once we transitioned to a staff member who I was supervising, that was still 2 to 3 hours of my week. Really, at this point, I spend about half an hour just checking in with our finance consultants, about half an hour, and then maybe 20 minutes more of approving things a week. It just has become so simplified. Next slide. I did want to highlight our transition with the accounting software. As I mentioned, we started with Quicken when I first started. We switched over to QuickBooks Desktop and then switched to QuickBooks Online. And I'll just let you, just our thought process with that is I'm the kind of person that likes to do research. I don't want to make a wrong decision. I check into things. And if you start looking into comparisons between QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online, you'll sometimes find where people, some people who were really accustomed to using QuickBooks Desktop and then transition to QuickBooks Online don't like it because of some of the reporting features and some of the different ways that the interface looks different. But those are people who used QuickBooks Desktop for a long time and then made a transition. So if you're starting fresh, never having seen QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks at all, if you're going from some other system, I really think that QuickBooks Online will do most of what you're looking for, or whatever other cloud-based system that's going to work for you. So I really would recommend learning from our mistake and not going through a desktop version first, just going straight to cloud-based if that's what's going to work for you. Next slide. And you can't really give a presentation in May 2020 and not mention COVID. So how all this worked and the timing for us is we were incredibly lucky. In January 2020, I was still signing checks by hand, and a staff member was still entering the accounting entries into a desktop computer. In February was when we moved to using the outsourced accountants and the cloud-based financial system. I will really highlight that was total luck, not prescience. I do not have a crystal ball. And really the only thing that's changed since COVID is that the weekly check-in that I do with the accountants is using Zoom. We don't do it in person. And we were able to, from this remote work setting, we transitioned to doing the payroll totally in the cloud now too. So we continued the transition, and we're able to continue that transition now to the cloud. Next. And oh, so this wasn't the most up-to-date version of the presentation, sorry. So there was another slide about the costs that I wanted to share. And really, all I really wanted to say about the costs, because I know that's high on people's mind, is that what we found was there was a lot of hidden costs with how we used to do things. We really were penny wise and pound foolish. So you think you're saving money by not using these systems and not spending money, but your time is money. And you really calculate out how much of your time or a staff member's time is being spent on the thing you're doing, and really think of if you had that time to do other things like fundraising, developing your donor program, developing your grant writing, you likely will find that you can really realize income growth through switching your finance system. So that's really all I wanted to say about the cost side. And I see that there's a few questions in the Q&A, so we could do some questions before Margaret does her portion.
Thanks, Amy. So it seems that the questions are about cost. Can you share some of the costs before and after, and anything else you'd like to share about costs?
I'd really, to get more specific into the exact costs. Okay, so Quicken was free. We had it for 10 years. We weren't updating it. My time at 10 hours, a week was my hourly rate times 10 a week times 52 weeks in a year. That's significant. Yeah, it's really significant when you think about it that way. And I think that's something that nonprofits often, I don't want to say we don't value our time, because I think we all realize we're all, if you're in leadership in a nonprofit, you realize that you're contributing greatly to our world. But I think we like when we have an event is what I often think about, when you have a fundraising event and you spend so many hours on that fundraising event, and then what your return is, you don't factor in the staff time usually. And so I think sometimes we think of the staff time as this just never-ending resource or something like this. We just don't calculate it when we're thinking about these things. So I just think that the staff time really was where we ended up with the savings. And so that's a bit, difficult to put a dollar amount on. What I'll say is that the contract bookkeeper to using Javier's group, or the person, we had her on our payroll, but that was, it was a little more expensive to switch to Javier's group, but it wasn't anything that would really, we're not talking huge amounts. I know that they do their pricing based on the individual circumstances, so I don't want to, say anything, commit to what their pricing structure is. But I would just say that having an hourly staff member versus them really wasn't that much difference, and the benefit towards using a CPA firm where we have 2 dedicated CPAs plus the backup of the whole firm is just worlds away from having an individual staff member.
And Amy, there's another question about why you chose Gusto for payroll instead of QBO.
QuickBooks Online. So QuickBooks can process payroll, and I think that's actually a question for Javier, because his team helped us make that decision. So if Javier and Ariel can weigh in as to why they prefer Gusto over just running payroll through QuickBooks.
Sure, be happy to. So let me go back a little bit to the cost question, because I know that you guys are interested in Amy and her costs, but this question comes, of course, every time that we are trying to sell our firm. How much you're going to charge us? And the answer is always the same. It all depends on what you want, what you need, and what your budget is. So what we can tell you is that you should look for a firm that has customizable packages. And customizable, I mean, again, by looking at the components of what is your budget, what is your timetable, what is your need, and how much information do you want to capture at this particular time. So packages begin at anywhere between anywhere from $500 to $1,000 a month, and they go up to very large amounts, depending upon how complex and sophisticated your organization is and what it needs to capture and deliver to its donors. So I think that I would turn the question around and say, what is it that you need? What is your budget? And what is your medium to long-term goal? And then create a plan just for that. So as Amy said, these kinds of investments pay off. This is, in our view, certainly one of the better investments that you can make in your organization, because of the nature of technology nowadays, because of the nature of the continued improvement that happens despite the work that we do. They are the ones in charge. We are riding the backs of these bright young people's minds who are constantly improving and making the systems more user-friendly, more usable, et cetera, et cetera. So cost, customizable, depends on your needs, but what we see is jump into it. To respond to the next question, Gusto versus QBO. So we use many different pieces of software for the same thing. For payroll, we have at least 4 or 5 vendors. Same thing for the accounting. We have QuickBooks, and we have Intact, and we have Xero, and we have Sage. Whereas in this particular case, Gusto had this QBO does not have. So QBO, QuickBooks Online, is a great accounting program. Intuit, as the company that owns QuickBooks, is not an expert in payroll software. They do a decent job, but it is nothing compared to companies like Gusto, who do nothing but payroll. Companies like ADP, companies like there are multitude of other companies that do nothing but the specialization in payroll. Now, Gusto, just to highlight what it has, is that it's not only inexpensive and very user-friendly in its platform and interaction with the vendors, but it's also begun to add HR components. So, for example, if you need to hire new staff, it has the ability of having the contract online, mean via Gusto, it gets sent to the applicant or to a new employee. It gets signed by the new employee and returned. Everything happens on the cloud. It gets access to the employee's database, and you don't have to deal with papers. Similarly, if the employee needs to go in and change either his or her address, or the bank to where the direct deposit needs to go, or the type of insurance that it has, Gusto offers all these things in a dashboard available to the employee without the intervention of the employer. This saves an incredible amount of time. They don't have to come to us and have to talk to us. They can just do and change the HR components that are applicable to them on their own. So again, the HR addition is what, in our view, makes Gusto one of the preferred small business payroll components.
Thanks, Javier. Let's turn now, thank you so much, Amy, and let's turn now to Margaret Melanie.
Hi, Margaret.
Thank you, everyone. I'm really glad to be here. It's kind of nice to be the last one because I get to reinforce everything Javier has said and Amy. The Writer Center is similar to Amy's group as far as having the same size company, but our mission is to empower writers and those who aspire to write through workshops and events and creative collaboration. We also support those who publish. So we've been around for about 40 years. We have a staff of 6, and our budget is less than $2 million. And about 60% of our revenue is earned income, which is the workshops, and we have a theater rentals and room rentals. So we do offer online workshops, and now we're doing video conferencing. But what I'm going to focus on is how we transitioned our website about a year ago, our website, and we went also to Donor Perfect. I had been with the Writer Center, I've been with them for 2 years now as their executive director. When we were looking at new systems, I was not a pro cloud-based person. And the main issue was the security. But when I looked at the benefits of cloud-based computing, it definitely outweighed a lot of the security issues. And I want to kind of go over some of those big pros of having cloud computing for small nonprofits. The number one reason is the ability of a cloud-based software application to interface with other applications and actually do it quite easily. For instance, QuickBooks Online and Bill.com can be synchronized automatically. With our model, we have Donor Perfect and our custom website are talking to each other. They're interfaced, and they're interfaced in real time. The second reason is the cost. It's a huge factor. A small organization such as ours, we would not be able to invest in standard analytical software and other robust features. A lot of what Javier was saying, we wouldn't have the money to do that. But with the cloud solutions, we can expand our metrics and our analytics and do this economically. It really does improve our ability to serve our community and our members. The third, and again, Javier said it, ease of use. We don't have technology managers on site. In fact, we have to outsource technology. But having WordPress as part of our website is a common application and easily can be changed by the staff when they need to. And so it gives us a lot more control of our system. And the ability to access the organization's records and applications away from the office and doing it at home. I mean, obviously we've seen the huge benefits of that lately. you know, and that includes doing our payroll. We use Payroll Network because we can do timesheets in Payroll Network and then process our payroll. And much like Gusto, the employees can make their own changes that don't have to involve other people. So, but knowing when it was time to make a change to a CERM and a website system, you know, when I came into the Writer Center, I'd watch, and if you could just see one day, and in one day I had a office manager who by 9:30 in the morning, she had fielded 6 phone calls with people that either forgot their password and there was no way for them to reset it without calling us, or the system just wasn't up and running, or the website was just too confusing. And so all the financial systems in place, if you don't have people signing up and having an easy time to register, you weren't going to have the revenue. And as Amy pointed out, this was costing the staff's time insurmountable, because then the program director would have to come in every day and manually review all of the workshops, and we do 300 a year, and she would look at all the workshops and try to determine which ones were full based on yesterday's transactions, and then if there were any that were being canceled, and then she'd have to communicate that to the office manager and call somebody to update it on our website. We didn't have that capability. So we really were strapped significantly. And, you know, I was going out and meeting people, and they would say, oh, I really, you know, I looked at your website and I was going to register for a workshop, and, you know, I got off of it and I never got back to it. You know, I need to do that. Well, I was hearing, I was on your website and lost interest, so I moved on. So, you know, and then I also found that the office manager was putting people on do not disturb and voicemail, because she had to process the checks manually. So it was just one thing after another, and it was very obvious to us, you know, obviously, that we had to make a change. So, and the bottom line here was, again, as Amy said, staff was spending so much of their time working on manual processes that a computer should be doing, and they weren't doing what they should be doing, which was impacting the mission. In addition to that, we were probably losing revenue, and we couldn't get our hands on exactly how much revenue we were losing just because people were walking away. So once we established it was time to make the change, we located a firm that had built a system and a website that was very similar to what our needs were. We did incur some consulting fees to customize the system for our needs and to ensure a smooth interface with our applications. We have the donations, the contributions, and the membership and the registration. But once that was done, then we were able to just have a monthly subscription fee. And again, we're in the cloud. Now we can do this less expensive than what it would have cost for us to have built this system ourselves. And we probably wouldn't have been able to have done it. The costs are half of what we were spending with our old antiquated system, and the value is tenfold. You know, a simple feature to demonstrate this was the reporting. We were able to report on how many people were signed up for a workshop, whether the workshop was sold out, and we were able to do that on real time, and it was listed on our website, and our program director didn't have to do anything except watch and see what workshops were getting full. Once she saw that they were full, then she could go on and see if maybe another instructor could add another class. So it was really helping us that way. Moving our financial systems to QuickBooks Online and Bill.com, again, very similar to Amy's, actually provided added benefits that we didn't anticipate. All the invoices are on a PDF in the system, so we don't have to do a filing and we don't have to lose documents. When the annual audit occurs, we can give the auditors limited read-only access and they are able to efficiently complete much of the field work. This also added some internal controls, which it's hard to do when you have a staff of 6. And with the review process, with Bill.com, we have an audit trail. We can see the input, who input the invoice, who reviewed and approved it. We can even decide who has access to Bill.com and who has access to QuickBooks Online. So those were actually added benefits we didn't see. So like I said, we did this a year ago, and in the process, what made it successful for us was making sure that the expectations are clear and attainable. Allow the one person assigned as a communicator extra time to focus on the project, and ask all the staff to take ownership and test the system and learn it. And then you do need to build in overage and time and cost, because all best efforts you may run over. But when we closed our offices physically in March because of the virus, we knew we'd be able to continue some of the events and workshops for our community using video conferencing. And we were able to do new workshops, and updates are made to the website, all from our homes. Security, yes, that's still a concern with cloud computing. As with anything, we do have firewalls, but more important, we do educate the staff on, looking out for maintaining security, looking for the scams. Are these solutions that we have today the perfect solutions? No, there's some quirks in them. We work around them, but we were able to reduce our cost. We were able to give staff free time to do things that they really need to do. And, and we're still in business right now, which I'm not sure we could have said that a year ago. So we will, we're committed to looking at it every 3 to 5 years. And so again, I want to impress what Javier said. You do need to look at how are you going to fund upgrades and renovations, because if you don't, you're going to be stuck with an antiquated system and maybe having the same story we had. It really is important to keep that in your budget. So that's all I had. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Margaret. I think I'm definitely seeing some themes, common themes here, and I'm sure some of our listeners are also empathizing with you there. I want to go over to the Q&A. I think we have a couple in the queue.
Yes, Anjaniki, there's a question for Margaret about Donor Perfect. Did Donor Perfect require a lot of hours of staff training in order to get the full benefit of the software?
It did not. They had training available to us, and we use that. We only use it really to manage our membership and to have a place where we can keep the records for everyone. It was pretty easy. You do have to be careful with Donor Perfect. There were some things we found out after we got online, and one thing was that they want to use their own merchant account system. So just make sure you get your questions answered on that, and really understand it. And that's where that outsourcing, like I said, I don't know if I made it clear, we outsource our accounting as well. Having that third party, that outsourced person that does this every day, having them there asking the questions for you, that's huge. It's worth the money.
I'd also add to that, Margaret, because we just, this is Amy speaking, we just switched to Donor Perfect as well. And we were making that transition right at the beginning of the calendar year. And so our staff member who does a lot of the donor management work, she's been using this time to really, they have all kinds of online tutorials. And so she's been working her way through all the online tutorials during the COVID-19 stuff. So she's been just using this time to really get trained up. So they do live trainings, but they also have a lot of recorded trainings available.
Yep. Yep.
So there was another question that Amy answered in writing, but I thought I'd ask this as well. It's about employee timesheet systems. And the person who asked the question said, currently we use Excel spreadsheets for employees. Employee fills it out, shares it with the executive director who computes and then transfers it to the payroll company, and wanted to talk about streamlining. Amy uses Gusto and mentioned that the timesheets are done right in Gusto, approved there, and there's no Excel spreadsheet needed. Are you using an employee time payroll system too with timesheets, Margaret?
We are. I mean, that's part of the payroll network system. So everyone has to put their timesheets in. What's nice about that is when they request time off, it goes in and gets approved, and once it's approved, it's already in the timesheet. It's kind of a nice little added feature. I think the one thing that I haven't done with Payroll Network is get into program cost evaluations, which you need to have if you're doing any federal government contracting. You need to have a much more robust timesheet tracking system. And so that's just something you need to take into consideration. But yeah,
and we're doing that in Gusto, where we're using a feature it's really more designed for for-profits, I think, where they have departments that you can put your time to. So like assuming that somebody's working in both the finance and the administrative department or whatever, different departments in an organization. So we're actually currently setting that up, but we're using the departments feature to do that so that people can code their time to different departments. So then they'll be able to, so again, what I really love about this is we were using, the person who said the Excel thing, that was us. And we had like 3 Excel sheets, one where you track your time off. I guess it's 2. One where you track your time off and your leave, and the other one where you track your weekly time sheet. And so now all of that's just in one place with an intuitive user face. The supervisor approves, same like Margaret said, you go in and ask for your time off and the supervisor can approve or deny it right there. It just makes it all so easy.
Yeah.
So
and
I think we have time.
I'm sorry, Payroll Network does do department reporting.
Let's try to catch one more question before we conclude. There's a question about security. Do you purchase additional cybersecurity for added online cloud-based programs? That may be referring to cybersecurity insurance.
That's something you should look into. Everybody should probably look into that. But we do outsourcing of our firewalls and security, and so they're keeping an eye on that for us.
Okay.
I would echo that. Our liability, we have the liability insurance that includes cyber liability, and then on the other hand, same like Margaret, same theme. We outsource our IT, and through them they take care of our cybersecurity in terms of firewall monitoring, threat monitoring, all of that.
And I also want to mention something. Go ahead, Javier.
Sorry, just one more thing. So if the question was referring to the tech stack and what kind of security does a third-party software firm offer, then first of all, just to make sure that we all understand that there is nothing that is foolproof. Some of the biggest for-profit companies and non-profit companies have been hacked into. So there is nothing that is 100% foolproof, unfortunately, and we have to recognize that. Now, when it comes to building your tech stack, then not all companies are created equal. There are many companies, well, there is, first of all, the ACPA, that's a CPA umbrella organization, has a certification of software companies with regards to the internal controls that they have. and that's something that we are very careful with. So if you are going to choose a different software provider for a particular function, it is worth looking into the type of certifications in terms of security that they currently have. Sorry, Amy, go ahead.
No, you're great.
And with
And Amy,
that,
I was just going to add one thing to that too, just thinking of, you might think what you're doing currently is secure because it's what you're doing and what you've always been doing, right? And so there's risk in what you've always been doing, even if you haven't examined the risk. So I think that's also, sometimes we see something new and different and think that that's the risky thing. Often whatever it was we were doing before probably had a heck of a lot more risk than some of the other options available.
Good point.
well, I want to thank all of our presenters here today, and hopefully the audience has gotten some really good food for thought on where to start with building a tech stack. And I want to also just mention really quickly that we encourage you to vet any company that you are looking at and plan to maybe go with, but also Maryland Nonprofits members do get discounts, a discount for working with the Goldin Group if you wanted to explore that option as you compare your other options. I do realize that we also didn't get to everyone's question, and these things are almost always like that, but we can take these questions that we didn't get to and send them out to the appropriate person. And then also, if you think of more questions after this and you want to reach out to any of our presenters directly, by all means, feel free. You can also send questions to learning@mdnonprofit.org, and we can get those to presenters if you didn't jot down those email addresses. And this recording, as well as the PowerPoint slides, will be made available to you. We'll be sending out a link to those docs in just in a day or two. So with that, I want to say thank you, and you all definitely enjoy the rest of your evening and the rest of your week.